welcome to our participants today, and we are now just about ready to get started. So welcome everyone to this webinar today, where we're looking at selling advisory services. I'm joined today by Trevor Marchant, the Managing Director of Marchant Dallas Consulting. How are you, Trevor?
I'm well, thanks, Peter. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And obviously ESS BIZTOOLS was appointed a distributor of the Boss Factor Library, which Trevor and his wife Eve have produced. And Trevor's going to tell you more about that today, but we're now going to move into this subject of looking at selling advisory services. So Trevor, can you start presenting now, or do you need me to?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Peter.
No, we need you on here. So, okay. So if you want to start presenting now.
Okay, can you bring those slides up?
Oh, okay, you need the slide back. Okay, just hang on a moment. Okay, you're right now, Trevor?
Yeah, I got the slide. Thanks for that. Well, firstly, I've just got a couple of ideas. I mean, we could go on for days or we could go on for minutes. So I'll just go on for minutes, but just a couple of ideas on selling advisory services. Now, the first thing I'd probably say to you is that, you know, if we go right back to, you know, a guy called Luca Pacioli, you may have heard of him if you're in your studies, but Luca apparently is the father of accounting, and way back in 1495 he introduced double entry bookkeeping. So there you go.
He worked at the Vatican, I think, Trevor.
Did he?
He did it for the church. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Now, saying that, I mean, I think accountants have always been in the advisory services business. I think, you know, it's gained popularity in the last few years, but you've always been in that service. I think it's just an extension of what you've been doing. You know, we've got more products, we've got more services to offer now. And probably what we're talking about is just this extension. And it's not so much about the numbers anymore. I think from a client's point of view, I think it's more about what the numbers can do. And I think, you know, the next step, or once you know, this next step is about deciding to go. And there's a lot of money, a lot of revenue to be collected in this advisory services business. If you look through some of the statistics, I think accountants generally are leaving a lot of business on the table. Business coaches, management consultants, they love accountants because you're actually perhaps feeding them with revenue that you should be taking on. I have a dear friend up in Cairns, Bill. He's an accountant, ex-PwC, been in the business for forever, lovely guy. And I was talking with him one day, I was in his office, and he was talking about his discussion with a client. And this discussion with the client, he was going through the financials with the client, and this amount of $3,000 kept reoccurring every month. And Bill asked the client, what was the $3,000? And the client sort of puffed up his chest and said, oh, he said, I've got a business coach. And and so Bill was, you know, there was silence in the room, and Bill said, you know, I could be doing that. And the client said, well, you know, Bill, you never told me about that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that accountants generally, and I've worked with a lot over the last 30 years, as you have, Peter. I think there's a lot of areas within what your current offerings are that perhaps you need to have a rethink about. And look, when it comes to services and products, I think, Peter, you've got a full array of that. I mean, you've got a lot of opportunities for accountants, I think, don't you?
Yes, yeah. We've tried to cover everything conceivably that they might be delivering or clients might ask them about.
Yeah, in that advisory space. So I've got, in my presentation here today, I've got basically one product, but I've got some ways in which you can deliver Peter's products, certainly, and there is one product towards the end that I just share with you. I think where we start, though, is once you understand that this is a business that you want to be in, this advisory space. I was looking at some stats the other day. The big four do it really well. Then the next 20 are starting to get into it. But for most of the other practices, the revenue from advisory is minimal. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity here for everybody to change their thinking and get into this. But I think you've got to start with learning how to sell professional services in a professional way. Now, a lot of accountants, there's a little bit of a fear around selling, and they didn't become accountants to get into selling. But I think it's important to note that advisory services, they're sold, they're not bought. If they were bought, people would be knocking on your door asking for these services. And in a lot of cases, they don't even know about these services. So I think that one of the first things to embrace is this notion that advisory services are sold, they are not bought. So in that saying that, then I think if you haven't had the opportunity to do any professional sales training, then I think that would be one of my first steps, one of my first strong suggestions to you. A, you want to get into the business because it's lucrative. B, there's plenty of products and services you've got to offer as an accountant. You should be offering those. Otherwise, business coaches and management consultants and the rest will offer those. Peter has a fabulous array of services that you can put into your suite of products and services to offer. So that part's okay. Then it becomes a question of selling them. Now, we have a program, we call it the Sales Factor, for professionals selling professional services in a professional manner. Now, this is completely up to you, but a little over 500 accountants have been through this program. Prior to COVID, we used to run it face-to-face in a classroom fashion, and Peter's been through that course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, had some fun.
So there you go.
And you learn a lot, Trevor, because one of the good things you had there, you had some business people, some clients.
Yeah.
And it was interesting getting their reaction on various questions. And they were not offended at accountants trying to present new services to them.
No, and that's a really good point you make, because I do think, in fact, they were quite pleased that you were there. Because they want to know about these services, and I think we have an obligation to bring these services, to the attention of these people. So prior to COVID, it was in a classroom situation. COVID has changed all that, as everybody knows. We now have it as an online program. It's a 12-module self-paced program, and it deals with three concepts. Firstly, mindset. The first 4 modules are about mindset, and that's really positioning selling for what it really is. It's not trying to sort of coerce somebody into something that they don't want. It's about finding out what people want, why they want it, and then showing them how you and your firm can help them get it. It's all about the gap. I like to talk about selling as a gap principle. In other words, there's a current state, there's a future state. So once we get a feel for where they are now, then get a feel for where they want to be or could be over the next 12 months, 2 years, whatever it might take, and then identify what that gap is. It's then a matter of do we have any products, any services that can fit into that gap to get those people there earlier. So this 12-module program runs through a mindset. It's a skill set, teaches you how to ask questions, how to deal with objections and all of those sorts of things, how to make presentations. And then there's a tool set, which is essentially looking at ways to generate opportunities and capitalize on what you've got. So I would strongly recommend that you have a look at that. There are other sales training programs around. I don't know that there's too many of those specifically aimed at accountants, whereas this one is. Well, it's aimed at professional people. It's just to date, mainly accountants have been through that program. We've just finished, 2 large firms have just been through it, one up in Hervey Bay and one down in Wagga, where all the partners and senior personnel, particularly those personnel who are client facing and dealing with clients in a face-to-face situation, have all been through that program. And you can do it individually. Those firms did it as a team, and it worked really well. They do a module, they discuss the module, they send some answers to me, I mark the answers, then we have a Zoom or a phone connection just to discuss, then we go on to the next module. But it's a fun course, and it takes the fear away from selling and positions selling in its right light. If you want to know a little bit more information about that course, just down the bottom of that slide there, you can see, just go to our website, Marchant Dallas /sales factor. So firstly, if you're deciding to go, and you should, because there's revenue to be collected, look at some of the products and services that Peter's got to offer. Plenty of those that you can fit into your advisory suite, and then embrace the notion that advisory services are sold, that they're not bought. You need to bring them to the attention of the client. Selling is nothing more than leadership. It's about leading people through a process. In fact, the word selling comes from an old English word, Saxon word called sellan, S-E-L-L-A-N. And sellan means to give. Basically, what you're doing in a sales situation is giving. You're swapping something for something else. And whatever you've got a purpose in selling, which we teach. Once you get your purpose in selling right, then it doesn't matter to whom you're talking. You'll always find there's an opportunity there to move forward. So, Pete, if you could slip over to that next slide.
Yeah, Trevor, just before we go though, if I can just raise another issue,
Yep.
You mentioned there that the firm in Wagga and in Hervey Bay had both had their team members there. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you think all firms should be trying to do that, so that young graduate accountants can understand that what they didn't learn at university is also very important, and this ability to be able to communicate and sell and promote the services that the firm can offer to their clients?
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, I think it's the only way to go, Peter. If I'm an accountant, I would be getting as many of my team members involved in this process, because then it becomes a fun. It's also a cultural issue. Through this program, you will actually affect the culture of the firm.
Yeah.
You will become a more of a firm that's about sales and service. And look, if you think about it, every business is about selling. There's in every business, there's 2 functions. There's doing the work and selling the work. And if you don't sell the work, well, there's no work to be done.
That's right. Yeah.
It's basically as simple as that. So to your point, I would encourage people to do this in a team. And one of the things that I particularly liked about these 2 firms that just finished, yes, they did encourage younger people to become part of it, which is good. And that also sets these firms aside as employers, because what they're offering their younger people is something more than just training around technical issues, IT and tax and things like that. So those firms become more attractive for younger people and other people who want to progress their careers, because they're getting into those soft skills.
Yes, helps very much with their attraction and retention policies, doesn't it? And
Absolutely.
This talent problems are the biggest issue. We're all being told by accountants, and it's not only accountants, it's virtually every industry.
Yeah, every industry that I've worked with. I mean, I've just been doing a lot of work with vets. And look, the same issue there. It's getting people. There's a shortage of vets, and there's a shortage of people who want to go to country areas and things of that nature. So you've got to build a practice as an accounting practice, or any practice for that matter, and offer some things. And offering something like sales training, which would be never have been heard of, years gone by, is something that, I mean, we've got a couple of big firms in the city now who have just finished the training program as well. this is a firm that's well, I won't tell you the number, but it's in the top 20 in
I know,
Oz.
right? Okay.
And they've just put their team through it as well. They put there was 4 partners. They put 2 partners and 4 of their managers through. Now they're about to bring through a whole bunch of younger people. So it is something that slowly firms are embracing. And look, I think life is about selling. I'm extremely biased. Look, if you have children, you're in sales, and not everybody has children. But if you've got kids, you're selling all the time. You're selling them on keeping, their room clean, going to bed at certain times. Yeah. So we're all in sales at some point. So whether it's a product, a service, or an idea, even in a practice, if you've got an idea that you want to sell the partners on, you've got to find a way to sell them.
Okay.
So I think this having an understanding of sales is critical for everybody. And it's a lifelong learning process. I mean, I've been doing this forever, but I'm still learning.
Yes, that's right.
I think sales is one of those things you just keep learning. You just keep better at.
Okay, Trevor. Well, that's very interesting, and thanks for that. We might move on to now the matrix, and what we're going to be looking at is filling the gap.
Yeah, well, this sort of follows on from what I've said before. Once you've got your services and products and you know what to sell, what we really need to look at firstly is our existing database. Look at our existing client base. Now, we have a fairly unique process here, but in the simplest of terms, what I'm getting at here is this. Let's just say you take a firm and you take the top 20 clients. Well, I might be an accountant and I've got my portfolio, so I take 20 of my clients. And on an Excel spreadsheet, I just list them down the left-hand side of my spreadsheet. Across the top, I list all my products and services, including some of the ones that you've got available for people. So we're looking at, your tax and your accounting compliance type products. We're also looking at quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, bookkeeping, all the sorts of things or other services we could offer. Now, what's interesting, when you do that, you then start to just tick off per client what products and services they've got. And all of a sudden, gaps appear.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what appears. Now, I've got a firm up in Armidale that did this little exercise just with a few people and identified over $100,000 worth of revenue. And then they persisted to work on that, and eventually they brought that revenue in. And one of the simplest lead generators for them was a will. They just said wills, and a bunch of these people that they just didn't have a will. So they just started talking to these people about putting a will in place, and that led to a whole bunch of other things. So
right. Yeah.
I would encourage every firm, and if you want more detailed information, I can provide information on this, on how we do it. But essentially, that's what it is. It's just a spreadsheet, products and services across the top, clients down the left-hand side. And if you imagine doing that with all of your clients, you will be, I promise you, you will be amazed at the opportunities that you reveal. And then what can happen is you might get 20 clients or 10 clients that perhaps should be looking at starting a self-managed super fund or doing something else, whatever it might be. So then you can mount a campaign to those people. And if you want help with that, well, then I know that Peter and myself, if you wanted to, we can help you put those sort of things together if you need help. But that's the idea of the matrix. So this is a line in the sand place. If you're going to get new business and grow your revenue, rather than go out and try and get some outside, firstly, make sure you're shoring up your own backyard, making sure that the people that you've got on board are actually being serviced well enough in this advisory space.
Trevor, you're reminding me in those comments about the start of the Financial Management Research Centre, and some of the older listeners will be familiar with the FMRC. And it was started by Dr. Jeff Meredith 40 odd years ago. And at that time, he wrote a report for the Australian accounting industry, and his research had told him there was at least 40% more income in every accounting firm in Australia if only accountants offered business services was what he called them in those days, not advisory services,
Yeah.
business services. Now, that was 40 years ago. And to be honest, I suspect that situation still exists
I'd
in
agree.
thousands of accounting firms around Australia.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, over the last 30 years, I've worked with 84 firms, I think it's now up to. And I would say to you that 90% of those firms have not really looked at this idea. Yet when they do look at this idea, they're amazed at what, and often it's overwhelming, because all of a sudden you see all this opportunity and you think, how can you possibly do it? But you know, it's there. And so I would encourage every firm. Look, I would just start with 10. I would just get 10 clients. Just take it simple, do it simply, put an array of services across the top. Talk to Peter about some of those services that you could put into your advisory suite, and then just do a ticker box and see where the gaps are.
That's right.
And you know, it's amazing. And what you can do, you can get a bit scientific with this, because you can then start adding, well, okay, well, we sell bookkeeping services. What's the average revenue we would get on that? What's the average profitability we'd make on that? So you can start then to play around in these gaps with some numbers, and you can start to project a revenue budget, a potential revenue budget for yourself.
That's right. Yeah. Trevor, I have a client who had about 20 tradies, you know, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, those sort of people as clients.
Yeah.
And he heard about our tradie charge out rate calculator, and he come to us. He's now got 120 tradies.
Wow.
He's charging them average price of $8,000 over and above what the tax return type fee was previously. Yeah. And he calculates their charge out rates. 120 extra $8,000. Do the maths, fellas. It's a lot of money, because he's become the go-to expert on tradie businesses. Now, every accountant in Australia, I think, or 99% of you, will have tradie businesses as clients. And a lot of them don't get their charge out rates right. They got no idea. They hear someone talking about a charge out rate in the pub, and that becomes their charge out rate without any connection at all to their operating costs or their productivity percentages or anything. And it's a great area, because we've all got these clients sitting around.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that we tend to forget is that when you look at businesses, most people who go into business, and there are exceptions to this rule, go into business because they are good at doing something. They are good technicians. They might be a plumber working for another plumber. They might be a pastry cook working in a bakery. They could be a vet working for another veterinary practice. Now, the thing about it is they reach a point where they feel like, I think I could do this better. I think I need to go into business for myself. I think I need to have a crack at this. I think I can make this work. And generally then they go into business, there's a startup, and technically they're very sound because they're good at what they do. And that in itself brings business in, because they're technically sound. But then as time goes on, they suddenly realize that running a business, they've got no idea about running a business. You know, all the nuances that you need to run a business. And then they get into trouble. They run out of talking to their family and their friends and their brother-in-law. They lose, you know, they've got to generate some business. They've got to manage people, and all of these things start to override. And this is where I think the accountant can step in with advisory services in these spaces. This is what I think there's a wonderful opportunity. If you went through 10 of your businesses, I think generally you will find, particularly small businesses and some micro businesses, most of the people that are running those businesses are good technicians.
That's
and
right.
Often they're not very good at marketing, at sales, at managing, those things. I remember Deakin University some years ago did a study on business failure. And you wonder about stats at times, but they suggested that 67% of businesses that go by the way fail because of poor management more than anything else. And that's the space that advisory services, business services can step in. I'm not saying you get in there and manage it for them, but you can show them a lot of things on how to manage their business better.
That's right. Perform the virtual CFO role, which
Absolutely.
is one of the products we've developed.
Well,
Trevor, we might move on to the referral code if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, wait there, I went too far. Referral code.
Yes, please. So basically what this idea, Pete, once again, this is not a product, it's a structure. So if you can imagine that we've decided to move into this space, we know how to sell, we've got some products and services, we've looked at our own database and we're doing some things there, we're filling the gaps, so things are looking good. We then go to, okay, let's look at outside of the business. Now, most accounting firms grow on the back of referrals and word of mouth. We know that for a fact. There are other ways to generate opportunities through social media and all sorts of things, but basically it comes down to referrals and it comes down to word of mouth, and both of those are slightly different, by the way. We have a program we call the referral code, and basically what this is about is, well, let me back up a bit. Most accounting firms, when you ask them about referrals, they say they get them. And I mean, my oldest son is a chartered accountant, and he says to me, Dad, he said, I get 2 or 3, 4 referrals every week. And I said, that's fantastic. I said, what are they like? He said, most of them, he said, I don't want. Most of them I prefer not to have. So what I'm leading up here with what the referral code does, it generates for you as many referrals as you want, when you want, and of the quality you want. So in other words, it's a proactive process of getting referrals rather than sit back, cross your fingers and hope someone refers some business to you. This is about having a system, a method in place that actually promotes referrals. And it's not about asking for referrals, it's about inviting. It's about inviting clients that you really like to work with to invite some of their friends and their colleagues, but it's more than that. So I'd encourage people when they reach a point where they feel like they'd like to grow their revenue, and once they've got all these services and things like that in place, to have a look at this referral code, because it is, I got the idea from a dentist. There's a dentist called Paddy Lund. He lives in Brisbane and he has a service, he has a dentistry practice where you can only get there by invitation and only certain clients are allowed to invite clients. Now, I've been to some of Paddy's lectures, I've got all of his stuff. So what I've done is adapted that for accounting firms. So referral code, I'd encourage people to inquire more about that through you or to me if they want it, whatever way you prefer, Peter. This is something I recommend you do once you've started to get a sense of, we've got our bases covered here, we're looking after our people, we're looking after our own clients, I know how to sell, I know what services I've got, and I want to go out and get some more business. I'd go the referral code way.
Okay.
That's all I really wanted to say on that. But
okay.
The important thing is there, you can dial it up or dial it down depending on capacity. So you can generate your own numbers. You can decide when you want them within a certain time frame. And also the most important part, you determine the quality, because we're only going to permit the type of people we want to work with, invite the type of people we want to work with, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's the way it works.
Righto.
And finally, this is the product. This is a product. And it was built, there's the website down the bottom. It was actually built for accountants. Now, I talked earlier about business coaching. There's a process in coaching where you start to look at cultural matters, business growth, management, personal goals, all those sorts of things. And there's the financial part. And a lot of business coaches get into all these other things here that I mentioned. This program has been designed And if you go to the website, there's a little a book that you can download that explains it all. It's actually been built to bolt onto your practice. So you can, and we have a couple of firms now, we've been doing this for a while, who offer this service. So it's basically a business coaching, business mentoring service that you can add to your practice. So if a client comes in and they say to you, look, I want to grow my business. Well, that might mean that, yes, you're doing all that you can do, but they might need to get into some more sales and marketing. They might need to develop some strategies around that. They might have some issues with the way they're managing their people or recruiting their people. I put personal goals in there. You see, at the end of the day, business is there to give you a life, not to consume it. And too often in business, we know that personal goals and business goals become intertwined. And what we have then is a mess. And that's where businesses start to crumble. Relationships are affected. In the Business Viva program, we separate the personal goals. So we find out what the business owners want to actually achieve from a personal point of view. And then we look at the business as the fuel, as the energy to achieve those goals. But I'd encourage all accountants to have a look at that model. It's a simple model. I work very closely with the accounting firm putting that together. All we do is we do some questionnaires of the client. We put a plan in place, and then we monitor the plan. And that's done on a joint basis with the accountant driving the issue. So that's the sort of the only product or services that I have, Peter, in this advisory space.
Okay.
Which is like a coaching mentoring program, but
Right.
It's a fabulous program to get into.
Okay.
And
Right.
pretty much covers it for me, Pete. I think they're the sort of main things that I would talk about.
Okay. Righto. Well, thanks very much, Trevor. I'm just going to move on.
You mentioned the boss factor.
Yes.
Well, that's going to come up in a week or so. The boss factor, have a look at the website. It's just www.bossfactor.com.au. The boss factor is a library of business coaching information, and it's available free to your clients, providing they come through you to get it. So any business in Australia can get hold of this business library for free, providing they come via their accountant. So once again, it's a product that's been built for accountants. But more about that in a week or so.
Okay. Well, on the screen there, Trevor, I've just got some. You've covered most of those. So we'll just move on. And the subscriptions to this new library, the Boss Factor library, are very reasonable. 12-month subscription, $495, which includes GST. Currently, there's 64 articles under those headings there: sales and marketing and leadership management and so on. Trevor, you're increasing the number of articles.
By the end of March, Pete, there'll be 100 in there. And it'll just keep going. It won't affect the price. And it goes into all those areas, as you just said.
So the people who are subscribing, and you add another 10 in April or May, they get access to those in that period.
No extra charge. No.
Okay. Righto. So it's covering a wide range of items. They're very interesting articles. They're thought-provoking. In the first instance, I think every accounting firm should be using them with all of your team. And then, as Trevor says, you can start distributing them to your clients. Now, Trevor's also introduced an unrestricted distribution rights. If you want to distribute all of the library to your clients, you can do so. There's an extra fee, $1,000, a one-off fee plus GST. So for $1,100, you can do that. That's your election. And there is badging rights whereby you are able to add your firm's logo onto the article that's been produced alongside the Marchant Dallas logo. And you can do that for a one-off fee of $1,100, including GST. So if you want to, you can distribute them to all your clients. You can send out all the articles, and you can badge them if you wish, but you don't have to. You can just stay with the $4.95. It goes out without badging, or you can take one of these. So if they just want to badge, Trevor, they can do that.
Absolutely. If they,
okay.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can do that.
Yeah. So
I think it's you make the point very strongly. It's really initially about personal and professional development for the team, but it's evolved into something that you can now share with your clients and also use as a lead generator for new clients.
Yes, great way to do that. So if you wish to subscribe for the library, and we're going to talk more about this library next week in our next webinar, which is on Thursday, the 2nd of February. Now, it was advertised as Wednesday, the 1st of February. Trevor's not available on that day now, so we've made it the next day. So if you have seen it, and the people who have registered have already received notification that we have had to switch it to the Thursday. So to subscribe, you can go to the ESS BizTools website, www.essbiztools.com.au. Click on the Boss Factor. It's a major heading on the home page, and then complete the purchase form. And all we need to know is your email address, and we'll tell you how you have to pay for it. So that's as simple as that. If you want to take the extras of the unrestricted distribution rights and the badging rights, there's provision for that decision on the purchase form. So our next webinar, as I said, is on the Boss Factor library. So Trevor's going to work through and give an overview of some of these 64 titles. I don't imagine you're going to talk about each of them, Trevor, but anyhow.
Just a couple.
And that's on Thursday, the 2nd of February at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, that's Queensland, and 12 p.m. AEDT. And that'll be 9 o'clock in Perth, and the other times you can work out one way or the other on the Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So Trevor and I are going to make that presentation. To register for that free webinar, please go to the ESS BizTools website, and where it says webinar registrations, just go in there and find the webinar on Thursday, the 2nd of February. So thank you very much for being with us today, Trevor, for this very interesting presentation. Thank you for the people who have attended, who have registered. There are other people who have registered. We'll be sending the webinar recording to them. And for those of you who are on live feed, if you have any questions, and I forgot to ask people for questions before, Trevor, but if you've got any questions, can you please send us an email, and I will forward it on to Trevor, peter@essbiztools.com.au. So Trevor, thank you very much. I'll see you again on Thursday, the 2nd of February.
Yes,
and geez, 1 month of the new year gone. Nearly gone already. Best wishes to everyone for Australia Day on Thursday, and hopefully we'll see you on Thursday, the 2nd of February. And if you have any other questions, please contact us. Trevor, do you want to give a phone number or an email address if anyone wants to contact you?
You can always get me at trevor@marchantdallas.com.au. So that's no problem. trevor@marchantdallas.com.au. And I'd encourage you, if you're half interested in the Boss Factor, just go to that website, www.bossfactor.com.au. Have a look at that, and then it'll make more sense to you when we talk about it in a week's time.
Okay. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.